Hello, this is Bill Baldwin of Boulevard Realty with an update on flood maps. Please be aware that the Harris County flood maps are about to change. In fact, the way flood maps will be determined is totally new and revolutionary. Make yourself aware of the process and the timeline at Map Next. Map Next stands for Harris County Modeling, Assessment, and Awareness Project, the first of its kind in the nation. It's the next generation of flood mapping using new methodologies, new technology, and new data. The new maps will be released in early 2025, and thousands of homes in Harris County are expected to be added to both the 100 and 500-year floodplains. Likewise, many homes may no longer be in the 100 or 500-year floodplains. After the announcement, there will be a period of 6 to 9 months of education and input. The adoption is not likely until late 2025 at the earliest. Please keep up to date and refer to Map Next on the Harris County Flood Control website.
HAR TV has expanded and we're now offering video services at 4 locations. Our Fort Bend branch located at 6608 Greatwood Parkway in Sugar Land. Our Montgomery County branch located at 25700 I-45 North in Spring. Our Bay Area branch located at 17225 El Camino Real in Bay Area. And our original location at HAR Central located at 3693 Southwest Freeway in Houston. All 4 locations offer all the same high quality video production that you have always experienced here at our central location. Contact us today to get your video appointment scheduled at any one of our 4 locations.
As realtors, we help our clients with all sorts of matters, including how to find available resources that may assist with the down payment. We are proud to announce that Down Payment Resource is now available on har.com. This will allow consumers to find out if they meet the criteria for any of the 70 different assistance programs available in the greater Houston region. Some programs are income-based, but many allow higher incomes than you may think. There are also programs specific for people in certain professions, such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers, and others. About 89% of all listings for sale in Houston qualify for some sort of down payment. To find out more, you may visit www.har.com/down payment and work with your realtor to make sure you have everything you need to be able to purchase the home of your dreams.
Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media and Sponsorships for HAR. And this morning we are talking all about flood mitigation, resiliency, education, and everything really that a realtor needs to know to better help their clients about this important topic. And with us today we have Bill Baldwin, who is a flood expert, I would say, and also serves on our HAR.com board. Welcome to the program, Bill.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Well, you are absolutely an expert in this topic. I know you teach a class about this and you have a lot of information that we're going to share this morning that I'm excited to get into. Before we jump into everything, though, I do want to mention that this week's Member Focus Monday is sponsored by Oakberry Trails. It is a new master plan community with homes for sale in Waller, Texas. Oakberry Trails is designed to offer residents a tranquil escape with an emphasis on outdoor-centric living. Upon completion, the community will feature approximately 800 single-family homes designed in partnership with Houston's leading builders. You can learn more about this new master plan community at oakberrytrails.com. Well, Bill, I want to get into all of this with you, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your current role with HAR and in the Houston real estate community.
Yes, thank you so much again. Yeah, I'm Bill Baldwin. I'm the broker and owner of Boulevard Realty. I've been a realtor for 28 years now. I'm known for the Greater Heights area, although I sell all over the city. But the Heights is high for a reason because it was trying to get out of flooded areas in downtown Houston 150 years ago. I do serve on the HRIS board, and I serve on MLS and government affairs. I'm most known for being on the City of Houston Planning Commission for the last decade. That's given me a lot of insight into some of these things that we're going to talk about here today. And I've just been involved. I serve on a lot of boards and commissions, and I try and make myself a community activist, which again led me to really want to take up this gauntlet of understanding flooding and all the different players that participate with flooding.
Thank you. And thank you for that work you do for the real estate community. Why is flood mitigation such a personal and professional priority for you?
I think every real estate agent is concerned that they might sell a house and then it flood. And no one wants to be in that position. No one wants to get the call from their clients who become their friends. Many of us lifelong confidence with these people that we've served, and deal with the impact of flooding. Flooding is a financial devastation. It's emotionally nerve-wracking. It can ruin people's lives. I mean, it can destroy their lives for an extended period of time. And so I've always just been very conscious about that. Now, we sell houses that have flooded, and we sell houses that might flood again. And if people understand their risk, and they're willing to take that risk, then we've done our job. But really educating the real estate community about these issues, especially government issues, how it impacts individuals, became a passion over the last 15 or 20 years. I'm blessed to have a lot of contact with politicians, so I know county judge and mayor and county commissioners and city council members. And so it's helped me to be able to navigate this very complicated endeavor of dealing with flooding and home ownership or home rental.
Very good. And we just have a comment that already came in from Lori Tillman. Thank you for all you do to educate the real estate community. So yes, thank you for that work. So let's talk about Houston's flood risk. How serious is Houston's flood risk today? And how has it evolved over the past decade?
Houston has always flooded from the 1830s to the 1930s to the 1970s. I mean, there's never been a period of time where Houston didn't have some flood risk. It's just that the risk keeps getting greater. You would think with billions of dollars being spent over the last, 7, 8, 9 decades that it would get easier, but it hasn't gotten easier. And a lot of that just has to do with climate in general. Density. As an unzoned city, we have massive redevelopment. We have rapid redevelopment. And it's just, we've never had the bandwidth to spend the amount of money it would take to really become resilient. Other cities do that. It's just that they're much smaller. And you've got to recognize the size of the city of Houston is just massive. It's larger than the 5 boroughs of New York City. And so when you have such a massive amount of land to deal with, we really just kind of kick the can down the road. We build roads to hold 1 to 2 inches of rainfall per hour. Well, that might have been great 100 years ago, but today we experience 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches of rainfall within the hour. When you get a gallon of water poured in your quart jug, the water has nowhere to go. And so it rises out of the street and into homes on a regular basis. Houstonians flood often. They don't just flood during hurricanes. We just read about it more, and we're impacted more by the hurricane. But we have a lot of flooding events that cause cars to flood, and street flooding that cause other issues. So it's the intensity. The current flood maps make an assumption that we have about 10 inches of rain every 12 hours. And that's how they've calculated. With Atlas 14, part of the new information for the new maps, that number is really about 16 inches. So that's a 60% increase of the rainfall, even in the last decade or two, that we're now calculating, and it's just the intensity continues to grow. As the Gulf warms up, it spreads and kind of grows over here to, the center of Houston, and then it releases that water. It can release it in West University Place. It could release it in Katy. It can release it in Kingwood. It doesn't. Who knows where it's going to go? So it's the quantity of rainfall and the intensity of rainfall in a short period of time that we really need to be more concerned about.
Very good. Thank you so much. So what's something that you believe realtors should understand about flood zones, floodplains, and how they impact property values?
I think one of the foremost things is that we've got to recognize the current flood maps are outdated and are not an accurate reflection of the flood risk that we have in Harris County. It's evident that they've been incorrect. And I don't want to just focus on Harvey, but in Harvey, 60-70% of the structures that flooded were outside not only the 100-year floodplain, but the 100 plus the 500-year floodplain. We still flooded more homes outside of those two floodplains. Now, take out Harvey, 75% of the FEMA flood claims that we have gotten over each decade, the last 3 decades, have been outside the 100-year floodplain. So clearly, the 100-year floodplain is not an accurate reflection of your risk. More structures flood outside the 100-year floodplain than inside the 100-year floodplain. The current flood maps are not accurate. We've known this for a long period of time. And so thus we have all this effort to get the new flood maps. But what we fail at in real estate is say, well, you're not in the 100-year floodplain, you're not likely to be at risk. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing is further from the truth. It may increase, your flood risk may be increased in the 100-year, but it certainly is not an indication that that's the only flood risk within Harris County. So, keep in mind your value will be impacted if you flood, so where, has that property flooded? What's the likelihood that it's going to flood again in the future? That's the question out there.
Yeah, very good. And Sharon actually just read my mind, because I know we've been waiting for quite some time for some updated FEMA flood maps, and there was recently an announcement made about that. Sharon saying when we may expect the new maps to be updated. So can you tell us a little bit about that recent announcement?
I just don't think anyone really knows. The announcement was that instead of releasing the maps this spring of 2025, they've now delayed it almost one more year to the spring of 2026. So we don't anticipate the new maps being released for almost a year. So let's call that spring of 2026. But they have been delayed for 5 straight years. We delayed it in 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. So we're all losing confidence that these maps are going to be out anytime soon, which is why I think we have, things like this, educating people, what can they do now before the flood maps come? So if the maps come out spring of 2026, there's still a comment period, and then there's a period of adoption. So you're talking about adoption in 2027 now. We're going to sell a lot of houses between now and 2027. And so let's get better educated before the new flood maps come out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's very frustrating. I know everyone is frustrated. No one's more frustrated than myself, but everyone is frustrated. I do think, the methodology is completely different. This is the first of its kind. I encourage everyone to go to Harris County Flood Control District's website and go to Map Next. You can kind of follow it there, although they, like most government entities, don't update their website as much as the private sector might like them to. But they've done a pretty good job of explaining the methodology. We used to just calculate rising water based on that 10 or 11 inches. Now you're really calculating what's happening upstream, the topography, the elevation, the percentage of impervious coverage, what is the drainage system. So, there's way more calculations into the risk of people when it comes to where the new maps are going to be drawn.
Very good. Well, obviously, as realtors, need to be all about education, right? So how can realtors better educate their clients about flood risks, especially when we're working with maps, as we're saying, that are not up to date, right? When they're buying or selling a home?
There's a lot of different ways. And like I said, we talked earlier, it could be a little complicated. There's so many players who are addressing flood and flood risk. Of course, you've got FEMA, you've got the Army Corps of Engineers that are doing some work, you've got Harris County Flood Control District, you've got street development and street mitigation projects through Harris County and through the City of Houston. You've got the City of Houston doing mitigation projects. So it is complicated to keep up with all of the different players, so continue to follow the news, continue to try and attend, I'll update my classes from time to time, but it can be very complicated, especially as the ordinances change that impact what we can do with our homes, and rapid redevelopment, as we discussed before. Most of us don't need to be concerned about our particular property. We need to be concerned what's happening 1 mile upstream, 5 miles upstream, 10 miles upstream. Those developments continue to impact even the inner city of Houston's impacted by what happens in West and North Houston. So continuing to stay educated, following, there's the alert system through Harris County's done a pretty good job, Harris County Flood Control District, their website, updating yourself all the time about different rules and regulations, and just being aware that it impacts the entire county. It's not just people in the 100-year floodplain. I encourage people also, go and pay attention to what's happening in your watershed. And that's kind of a complicated topic, but what are those projects that are impacting you upstream? And you can follow them very well on the Harris County Flood Control District's website.
Excellent. Thank you.
New projects too. I mean, just to be clear, I-45 expansion, I-10's redevelopment, all of those sort of things massively impact particular homes and neighborhoods as they've never been impacted before.
Yeah, very good points. Thank you so much, Bill. We have a few questions that came in that I want to address. She asked, what's the best way to address client's question, is this house in a flood zone?
Every house is in a flood zone. So there's no house that's not in a flood zone. So what flood zone is it in today? And what is it likely to be in tomorrow? And it's a very complicated topic. It's what the city did and the county did at the request of FEMA to keep Houston where it qualified for flood insurance and flood protections is to kind of gauge the 500-year base flood elevation today and raise if you just poured additional water into that deal, it's why we regulate and we require new construction to be 2 feet above the 500-year base flood elevation versus the old regulation of 1 foot over the 100-year base flood elevation. So the assumption is that what is the 500-year base flood elevation will likely become the larger 100-year base flood elevation. That's an additional 150 to 200,000 acres of land within Harris County, and could be as many as 100,000 new homes. But I think we're used to this map being contiguous. So you have a line that's Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. You will find pockets now in the new maps that are not contiguous to that deal that would then be in the 500-year or 100-year flood elevation. So it's not a linear map when the new maps come out. You could find Kansas is now in the floodplain, but Oklahoma is not. So how did that happen? Well, it's shallower. The elevation is not as high. So it's not, the lines aren't going to be as straight as they were in the past because the technology was better. But you must assume that you're in a high risk flood zone. It's what is your elevation, and then what is the tolerance of your risk. You can build, people, Chronicle just asked, what about not building in, a high risk flood zone? You're talking about more than 1/3 of the land of Harris County. 1/3 of the land. If you remove those structures and couldn't build on 1/3 of the land, Harris County would never be able to mow or maintain that amount of property. Not building in the floodplain or a high-risk floodplain is really not an option. It's how we build and how much more resilient we can build in those areas. So I just want to be realistic. There is some flood risk everywhere, and you just need to be aware of what that risk is.
Yeah, very good. We have a couple comments that have come in just asking about, and I know with your position with the city, you're primarily looking at Houston and Harris County. Mitch was saying, can you comment on the surrounding counties? So, we of course serve clients all over the Houston surrounding areas.
Definitely, you're seeing more rapid development outside of Harris County. Harris County is relatively further developed, more expensive, and let's be honest, we really have more regulations than they do in Montgomery County or Fort Bend County. And so you're seeing, rapid redevelop around Willis, around Fulshire, Manville, all of those sort of areas. And honestly, those counties have not been they haven't been required to have stricter regulations. They don't have the same regulations that we do, although over time, when they get more density, I feel like they will be required to have a higher threshold for some of this sort of thing. Definitely that impact in the surrounding counties impacts Harris County, but it's going to impact those counties also. We are totally impacted in Harris County, especially North Harris County, by Montgomery County. I mean, the water and the water flow often is coming from there, and if they don't mitigate their water, then we're impacted. The counties do work better than you think. I mean, like, no one in Montgomery County wants structures to flood either, right? I mean, they typically have larger lots, though, that hold water a little bit longer versus our postage size type lot that we have in the inner city or in the ETJ these days. So the short answer is the surrounding counties are not as heavily regulated today as Harris County is. They continue to increase their regulations over time as they get the density, the tax base that they need in order to make some of these changes.
Okay, very good. And we're going to talk about policy in just a bit, but I know that's something else that definitely weighs in here. Taking a look, I know there's a lot of questions coming in. Some are repeat questions, so hopefully we're getting a broad aspect of people's comments here. There's a lot of comments about flood insurance, obviously, going on in the chat. Very
Let's
important. And I just wanted to mention real quick, Glenn just said you can now get an instant quote for flood insurance from FEMA and the NFIP at floodsmart.gov. It's a new tool that rolled out this year. So yeah, Bill, talk to us about flood insurance.
It's highly advised that almost every structure in Harris County should get flood insurance. Now, I'm realistic. Some people don't or can't afford it, and the cost of insurance has gone up. But I think the thing to remember, if we take Harvey, about 33% of the structures in Harris County had flood insurance the day Harvey hit. After Harvey, there's a huge awareness. Everyone should go get flood insurance. So that number bumped up, to about 45, 50%. Today, whatever today is, May of 2025, we have less structures covered by flood insurance today than we do when Harvey hit. We have less. Now, the cost is greater than it was during Harvey. 50% of the real estate agents may be new. So many of the people are moving into the area. We're not here when Harvey was hit. I mean, I get it. We still have this stigma that you really only probably need it because it's required in the 100-year floodplain. But we need to encourage people to secure flood insurance early on. And there's a number of reasons. When the new maps kick in, once you have the flood insurance, almost all of that flood insurance is transferable to a new homeowner. So, I mean, that's a selling point in itself. The cap that Congress has set that the rate could raise no more than 18% per year. So if you're in at $800 and then it goes up to, $900 and goes up to $1,050, that's one thing. But if you let it lapse and you have to go get it, and now you're in the 100-year floodplain, and that rate's $4,000 or $5,000, it's going to impact the value of your home sale. It's going to impact your ability to sell your home. It would be so much wiser if people just had flood insurance. And for all of us, the more that have insurance, the actual cheaper it would become. It'd be cheaper to maintain if we had more people that were participating. You will see more and more private flood insurance. I don't want to think about just flood insurance through FEMA. I mean, we all believe these flood insurance policies continue to need another overhaul. It seems a little insane to me in our 2025 that there would be a $250,000 cap when many, $2 million home, $250,000 is not near enough coverage for these homes. You could get additional coverage, of course, for private flood insurance. So you're going to see more and more and more movement to the private flood insurance also. Hopefully FEMA will revise their deal every so often, raise that $250,000 threshold, to a larger number, allow different staggered options for people. But, I would think that there's some risk of a car flooding, from rising water that would not be covered otherwise. Even if your house, you can have a house in Grays Heights or Bel Air or Meyerland that's raised 10 feet up in the ground, but still when you have, two expensive cars there in the garage, you'd want some type of insurance to cover those cars as well. So I mean, we're all frustrated with the cost of insurance in general. The cost of general homeowners insurance has risen dramatically over the last few years. The cost of flood insurance has gone up for most of it. It did go down for some people after some of the revisions. And so I think, if you know that your home is 2 feet above the 500-year base flood elevation. That should allow you to negotiate your rate better for these flood insurance programs that are out there, because your risk would be less, even if you're in the 100-year floodplain today. So I think it's a competitive industry. I think even the government will see more people getting into private flood insurance, which has the potential to lower the cost for many of us, especially with homes of values greater than $250,000.
Very good. I want to get into the policy piece here in just a little bit, but we have a few people just mentioning stigmatizing a particular property. So, if and this is something that I think we've talked about over the years as well, especially during Harvey. There was people asking, did this home flood during Harvey? But we had other floods that during that time as well. So
extensively. And spoken about it. We did a study. I did a presentation to the Meyerland Homeowners Association about their property values post Harvey. I just did and will be on TV studying the values of homes that flooded in the pool. And the reality of it is that Houstonians have a very short memory for things of this nature. People find Meyerland very attractive. They want to live there for any number of reasons. And the actual value of homes in Meyerland since Harvey has actually been greater than the average of Harris County. So there didn't appear to be any stigma in Meyerland after the initial, people, maybe sold and took their insurance money and moved out of the way. The same thing, the exact same thing is in the flood pool. Many of those homes didn't even know they were in the flood pool. The number of home sales in 2024 and the value with which they sold in the flood pool exceeded the average of Harris County. There didn't appear to be a stigma. I have sold, subsequent to Harvey, numerous homes that flooded, and I have sold for the buying side and for the selling side. And I think there wouldn't be a stigma, and I'm not saying there is no stigma. I want to be clear. There could be some stigma for some people. With education, just because you flooded in the past does not mean that you're going to flood in the future. There are billions of dollars being spent to help eradicate some of those issues. And the fact that you've never flooded doesn't mean that you may not flood again and that you may not flood in the future. So long as the consumer knows the risk and that realtor has educated those people well, people will assume that risk. Look, guys, we all drink at a restaurant and drive, and there's some risk there, right? You understand the risk that you're taking if you have a drink and you drive, and we take that risk most of the time and evaluate that risk proportionately. I just sold a house in Kingwood that had 4.5 feet of water in it. My client wanted to be they want to be very close to their grandchildren. They're at an age they feel like they could absorb the loss if there was one, and they were willing to take that trade. They wanted to live in that neighborhood, in that house, and there was not a stigma to them. And they understand that there is still some risk. Look, I'm not too worried about a Harvey. That's really not our greatest risk today, although I'm can't predict the future. Each of our flood events, Allison, Ike, Harvey, they've all been different. That's what I want us to be. I don't want us to be scared of purchasing a home. I just want us to be aware. If the intensity of the rainfall is different and it's shifted over 5 miles, the result would be different. So every home site has some risk, and just understanding that risk and preparing for it is the thing. So I'm not saying there is no stigma. I'm just saying I can show you through property values and property sales that there hasn't been a stigma to a particular neighborhood, of neighborhoods that we would have thought would have had a stigma to them immediately, and there hadn't been.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. Just another comment here from Edward. He said Canyon Gate is selling for more than they did before Harvey, and they are in the pool as well.
That's one of those deals we just studied. It's going to be on PBS. You're going to see me another week or two discussing that very subdivision.
And we're going to move into a different topic, but I wanted to just mention, going back to the flood insurance, Rhonda brought up a great point that renters can also get flood insurance. It's just as advisable as it is with homeowners. So great comment there from Rhonda. Thank you. Yeah. So what types of infrastructure or policy changes could help reduce future flood risks across the region?
immediately after Harvey, we modified the flood rules and the development rules after that. So and one of the things that we allowed, if you were doing an addition in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain and you did less than 1/3, we let you continue to do that. So the threshold was 1/3. Why we would let someone spend $100,000 doing a modest addition, knowing that it has a high likelihood of flooding, it is a little beyond me, but that was where the bandwidth was. Look, these are political positions. They face re-election. So I think the things that probably come to mind is increased impervious coverage rules, especially in the city of Houston and the outlying areas. Many more resilient cities, they tend to be smaller, Hunters Creek, West University Place, some of these areas have much higher impervious coverage rules. We allow you to really fill up most of your lot, which is a contributing factor to the neighbor next door flooding and a lot of flooding. So I think modifying those rules, increasing the amount of detention, when we tried to lower that detention rule to the 5,000 square foot lot, there was an outcry of everyone. And so that number is a higher lot size. So you have higher detention rules at lots at 15,000 and greater than you do 15,000 below. But I would say that's still on the table. Higher impervious coverage is still on the table. Modifying those initial rules so that almost any addition in the 100 or 500 year floodplain would be at the new floodplain rule of the 500 plus 2. So those are kind of three that immediately come to mind. People, I don't think we'll see too much more just individual detention rules on your particular lot, just maybe modifying the size with which those rules kick in. And then as we discussed before, increasing some of those rules in the outlying counties would be good for those counties, and it would be good for Harris County. You'll see some state attempt, to try and regulate a little bit, but it's a very unregulated state. I mean, for the most part, there are fewer regulations than ever. We've tried to, even from the Planning Commission, don't think that this initiative is going anywhere at the moment, but a maximum development rule. Right now you can, in the commercial span, you can develop almost all of that property, and the detention is actually very low. So if we had stricter detention for these apartment complexes and high rises and massive developments, it would help mitigate some of the issues in the surrounding subdivisions. Getting the government to act also. I mean, you need these TERSs to put money into drainage. You need the management districts. You need the county. You need the city. Passing the latest bond issue where we had more money for the maintenance. Those things are important, and they will have an impact. When we passed the initial bond after Harvey, it was basically a $2 billion sort of deal. We knew at that moment we had a $25 billion need. And if you delayed the implementation, the $25 billion need would become $50 billion within 20 years. Mm-hmm. If you hack away at $2 billion, you're barely putting a dent into the problem that you've already know about. The North Canal is this huge project that we're working on. It's right north of downtown, kind of where 610 and 59 meet. That project could significantly reduce the number of homes in the 100 and 500 year floodplain. We're talking about 80,000 structures could be removed. We have been talking about and trying to fund this project since the 1970s. This is 60 years later. And you look back at the Barker Reservoir and the Addicts Reservoir, those projects were done very rapidly. They were done within a very few years. It takes us 20, 30 years to complete one of these Braze projects, along Braze Bayou. That's really, we should demand better from our politicians and from even the federal government to implement these decisions quicker and to finish the projects much quicker. We didn't have the capacity, though. If I gave everyone here 500 new listings, do you have the capacity to deal with 500 new listings? We didn't have the engineers, we didn't have the workers to do all the work once we passed that bond issue, which then caused the price of those units to go up proportionately.
Thank you so much. And I think that really, you kind of mentioned it, paying attention to what's going on in your local area. I think, realtors as advocates in their communities, this is really a place for people to get involved no matter what county they're in.
Absolutely. I meant that, stay involved. Your local city council member has capital improvement projects. There's a 5-year plan. So to get your drainage projects implemented, you got to get on the CIP. You've got to stay on the forefront of what the county and, like I say, these management districts and TERSs are doing. They can greatly impact. We have better drainage where we have a TERS that's spending a lot of money. But if you just do 1 mile of development along Westheimer, the surrounding area around Westheimer still was not done. And so it didn't solve the problem. We're piecemealing some of these solutions instead of looking at it comprehensively. But yeah, even the Adopt a Drain project, if you would all go to the adoptadrain.org or whatever at the city of Houston and try before a hurricane to clear out the debris just in the storm sewer system, you can greater increase the capacity. All of the water is from anywhere that we have, where if you're in West Houston, it's all going to drain basically to the Port of Houston. So how is the water going to get to the Port of Houston? It's going to get there through the sewer system, it's going to get there through the bayou, or it's going to get there through draining across someone's property. So you've got to figure out how are we going to get that water there quicker and greater capacity. Not putting leaves and twigs and other things into the storm sewer allows for greater capacity for water.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Are there any misconceptions that you often hear when it comes to flood insurance or flood risk?
I'm not in the 100-year floodplain, so I don't have a flood risk. That's the greatest And the second misconception, I've never flooded in the past, so I'm not going to flood in the future. Both of those things are very misleading. Now, I want to be clear, just because you flooded in the past, may or may not mean that you're going to flood in the future. And if you've never flooded, maybe your likelihood is that you're not as apt to flood, but I'm telling you, the intensity changes all the time. Where the saturation of the water is changes every year. The development pattern up to your west and north is significantly, and all of those things. You redevelop the Sears building at 43rd and Shepherd, it can impact the people down in Garden Oaks Section 1 that have never flooded before, right? I understand you never flooded before, but you never had $500 million worth of redevelopment within 2 miles of your area. So paying attention to development patterns north, participating in the conversations, I think that's what's misleading. Mm-hmm. There are steps that we can all take. We can build, I live in the 100-year floodplain, but I don't flood because I have a house on its pier and beam. It can hold the water underneath the house. You step up 4 steps. My street's relatively redone. My drains stay clean. I mean, there's things, clean my own drains out. Those sort of things. There are certain things that you can do to reduce your risk. The key is to understand there is some risk. There is some risk all throughout Harris County and the surrounding county. So if we know our risk, there's a risk when I drove here today, right? There was a risk I could be in an accident. There's all kinds of risks. I make the analogy. I've never had a car wreck before, so that means I don't need car insurance, right? No, nothing could be further from the truth. Just because you've never had a car wreck before, take into account if we add 100,000 more people to Harris County, if we change the road construction and now your people are darting in and around your neighborhood that never darted in and around your neighborhood before. There are factors outside of your control that impact your level of risk, and being aware that there is some risk is the most important thing.
What resources or steps would you recommend for homeowners who want to proactively reduce their flood risk?
I would definitely get in the habit of going to the Harris County Flood Control District and looking at the construction sites and the progress that's being made along your watershed. So the website is actually very good. It's in real time. Many times you can see the photos. Reporting issues, if you see issues in the bayou or obstructions or things, reporting those things both to the city through 311 or to the Harris County Flood Control District. But I do think building higher is an important. I am very concerned about the number of structures that we continue to build where the slab is very low to the ground. Mm-hmm. And they're able to do so because they're not in the 100 or 500-year floodplain today, but they very well could be there in the very near future. So I'm a huge proponent of a larger foundation, higher foundation, or pier and beam construction. I think if we would just build 24 inches above the ground with pier and beam, and you could hold that water and you could put your drains underneath, I think that's a smarter way to build in an area that has a high propensity of flooding. Adding a little more detention, creating, places to hold water even from your gutter system into the rain barrel. I mean, these little bitty things done collectively by a million people can make a huge impact on flooding and how we flood both our neighbors and the rest of the county.
And how can we advocate for smarter development practices that don't worsen our flood conditions in the city?
Just stay involved. I mean, this conversation should be, on a regular basis with people who make those decisions. And they make them, like I say, at every level of government. There's, here's a new $7 billion budget being announced by the city of Houston. And they are, after the lawsuit, going to spend more money on drainage projects. I think that's a good thing. That should help all of us. But there will be other road construction projects that are just in the budget that would impact your ability, the flooding of your impact. At the county level, same thing. Push at the county level for stricter regulations, and for, even the commissioners are frustrated with the pace with which the progress has been made at the Harris County Flood Control District. So continuing to share with them, because look, they need you to be an advocate to get these jobs done. We have to stay on the federal government. You have to stay at HGAC. I mean, like I say, you got to stay on these management districts. You got to stay on the TERSs. There's a lot of people, not just one entity, that we have to advocate for. The Houston Association of Realtors must advocate for more of these things in those other entities. And we do very little to advocate at TERS level or management level, but they greatly impact subdivisions and developments that are nearby. So staying abreast with those sort of things, keeping a good open door of communication with those people that are making the decisions, following the progress along, sign up for the alerts at the Harris County Flood Control District, just so you could see, one of the things we haven't talked about, there is no great database of structures that have flooded. And I get asked all the time, where can I go and see if this house flooded? They make it virtually impossible. I mean, for privacy rules, I don't know why. I mean, I'm still bewildered why we don't have a database available to the public that shows the homes that flooded at different events, but they don't. Having a great relationship with an insurance agent then becomes more and more important, to run the reports. And there again, you could track through the census data. What were the number of flood claims in your particular census data over the last 5 years, 10 years? What were the number of structures that have flooded nearby? That is readily available. You can't tell what the structures are, but you can tell how many structures in your census tract flooded. So that's a pretty good indication that there's some issue nearby.
Okay, very good. Bill, I'm just curious, what's one thing that you wish every home buyer in Houston knew before closing on a property?
I wish they would know what the elevation of their structure is, and not the 100-year base flood elevation, but the 500-year base flood elevation. So we're encouraging everyone now, when you're getting your survey, get an elevation certificate, because you could be in the 100-year floodplain very soon, and you need to have that surveyor mark the 500-year base flood elevation. And are you 2 feet above the 500-year? In my world, that's all that matters. I could care less if you're over the 100-year base flood elevation, because that's not an accurate reflection when the new maps kick into play. So what is your elevation over the 500-year base flood elevation today? That's going to be your indication. It's hard for people to understand the current year 100-year base flood elevation will be modified with the new map. So in relationship to the 500-year base flood elevation, where are you? And if you're not 2 feet above that, you need to have some level of concern. Across the city, we should know this information, and it's not easy to get, but this is the time to get it. When buying a house, that's the time to get it. It's not that much more expensive to get an elevation certificate and have them mark the 500-year base flood elevation. It's a very hard concept to understand, but I stress and stress and stress and stress it. You're going to wish you had it. We have that information at the city and the county. If you're in the 100-year and 500-year base flood elevation and you've done any project, you've had to provide that information. You have to submit that information to the city and the county. So we have a database for that. But if you haven't done any work and you don't know it, you're going to need that in order to have work done in the 100 and 500 base flood elevation.
Very good. Thank you so much, Bill. I mean, you have shared so much information today, and I think this is really just such a big benefit. We've had a lot of people thanking you already. Rene Galvan was in the chat. He said, thank you for sharing your expertise with us, as many others did as well. Bill, is there anything else that you'd like to share with realtors in regard to flood education and resilience?
Feel free to reach out to me. I probably have 5 to 10 real estate professionals reach out to me on a very regular basis to ask my thought on particular houses. So I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share slides. I will. I had a pretty good class going on. We stopped it during COVID because it was one of those things I needed addresses. It was a very interactive class. It didn't work so well over Zoom, but we're going to start back the classes, and I'm happy to go to your office. I've been invited to Keller Williams and to Compass and Better Homes and Gardens. I'll go to your office. It is a 2-hour class, and so when you try and consolidate a 2-hour class with 156 slides to 30 minutes, it's a little complicated. But look for one of my classes or send me an email. I'm happy to share any information that I have. This is information that we think should be readily available to every real estate professional in our area.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for, of course, your expertise, but sharing that and your passion to this particular topic. It's again one of the most important things that I think homeowners are wondering when they're coming to purchase a property in the Houston area. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, today's Member Focus Monday was brought to you by Oakberry Trails, a new master plan community in Waller, Texas, offering a peaceful, outdoor-focused lifestyle. When complete, Oakberry Trails will include 800 single-family homes built in collaboration with some of Houston's top builders. You can discover more at oakberrytrails.com. Also, next week, we will be back on 9 a.m. Monday morning discussing techniques to avoid burnout with HAR Chair Shay Cotter. So be sure to tune in for that one. Bill, again, thank you so much for your time today. We've got a lot of people thanking you in the comments, and just such great information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.